I knew the longer this channel went on, we'd get to it eventually. It's time to eat the rich.
I'll organize revolt. Exact a death for a death.
Have you finished?
I'm only just beginning. From this night on, I use every means in my power to fight you.
I got a confession. I'm not a huge Mego fan.
Why, you speak treason.
Fluently.
I know that's not a cool thing for a vintage toy collector to say. It's outright wrong. It doesn't mean I hate them. In fact, I find them very charming. I really like Mego figures. But they come with limitations. They come with frustrating caveats that because I was born right after their heyday, as much as I enjoy the past, I can't really get into collecting them very deeply. They have the strings that run through the bodies so that their posability is very janky. It makes Masters of the Universe figures' legs look outright precise by comparison.
I advise you to curb that wagging tongue of yours.
It's a habit I've never formed, Your Grace.
You've also got the hands that don't really hold things very well. Other than that, I really love Megos. I like their leotard-like pajama costumes. I like the way that their faces are sculpted. I like the way they have the big sort of vinyl plastic boots. Not real wild about mitten gloves, but by and large, I really like Megos as a concept. I just don't like them in execution. But what I do really like is Robin Hood. And Robin Hood has been a lifelong obsession of mine. I've been trying to get a Robin Hood documentary going for several years now. But in the run-up to that, I've been collecting a number of things in the background as prep for that. And I've also had some really nice donations from some RetroBlasting supporters. And a few years ago, there was a very kind donation to the channel of a Robin Hood and Will Scarlet that appeared to be Mego figures until I read the letter and the person said, these are actually reproductions by a company called ClassicTVToys. And these were made in 2005. I went online and did my research, and turns out that they pretty much just copied the Mego figures for Robin Hood and his merry men. And they are almost identical. They have some paint shade differences and some costume accessory color differences, but by and large, they are very similar to the original Mego figures. Now, at the time, I wondered how they were able to do this and put them out in a semi-official way, and then I kind of walked back a little bit and realized, oh, well, Robin Hood has always been public domain anyway. And with Mego being a defunct company at this point, Robin Hood itself is probably a very easy thing to turn around and flip back into the market. Mego's dead, their sculpts are orphaned, Robin Hood is open source. No brainer.
You must tell me more about myself. You may have been misinformed.
And that's one of the things I really love about Robin Hood, is the fact that as a character, his legal history actually reflects his entire thematic purpose. Robin Hood cannot be owned. Robin Hood cannot be taken in by a corporation and held captive. Robin Hood can be made into a story or a piece of media or a video game by literally anyone.
And you'd be right.
But the pros in this situation far outweigh the cons in this overly corporatized, owned world we live in. Knowing that Robin Hood cannot be owned by a corporation makes him twice as awesome as he already is. So it's probably no surprise that I really leaned into finding the other two characters from this ClassicTVToys range of Mego reproductions. The Megos themselves are readily available, but they are quite expensive. Mego Robin Hood figures go for about $100+ in good condition. I wasn't really interested in getting into the Mego business with Robin Hood because I wanted to complete these ClassicTVToys instead. And there were only 4 merry men in the line, and I already had 2 of them. But finding the ClassicTVToys variants was harder than I thought. Everywhere I would look, it was Mego branded ones, the originals, and they were very expensive, like I just said. So it took a while to source. I needed Friar Tuck and I needed Little John to complete the 4. And I would look and I would look and I would look, and then finally I would happen upon one and it was in good shape and not damaged or missing pieces, and that would be like $20, which is a lot better than the $130 for a Mego. So now I have the complete collection. They come in Mego-style window boxes that have the Mego logo replaced with ClassicTVToys in a kind of blurry, almost inkjet printer-style resolution, which does look a little bootleggy, I'll admit. I have no idea what they did to get that packaging together. I have no idea if that was shortchanged in favor of trying to make the figures. Who knows? The figures themselves inside aren't bad at all. They look like Megos. Of course, we have to start with Robin Hood. Robin Hood has a really great green and yellow two-tone color combination. He comes with his bicocket hat, a quiver, a longbow, a dagger, his waist belt, and his boots. And he also comes with a really great face sculpt that, while not exactly Errol Flynn, is that classic Robin Hood look from the myth. He's half Errol Flynn and half the classic ballads of Robin Hood. Next up, we have Little John with a brown variant of the bicocket hat. He also comes with his boots, his waist belt, a dagger, and his famous quarterstaff. Then we have the famous Friar Tuck. Friar Tuck is the shortest of all the figures in this group. He's also the one that has the weirdest body because they try to make him look a little more rotund by giving him a different torso underneath that robe, and it really makes his legs janky. Now, I don't know if this is different on the original Mego. It doesn't look to be from photos, but with the way they've done the elastic banding inside his body on this figure, it really makes his ability to pose with his legs very difficult. However, this is a trait of all four of these figures. Their posing is very restricted and snaps back into place in ways and poses that you're generally not wanting when you're trying to set these up for display. I assume that's the Mego construction itself more than Classic TV Toys, but you Mego experts tell me otherwise. I could be totally wrong on that. Friar Tuck comes with his belt pouch, his sandals, and his own quarterstaff. And it appears he does deviate from the Mego version in another key way, where the Mego version had a rope belt that was made out of inert string, while this one is very elasticized, which admittedly does make the situation with his hip joints even more difficult. Last up is Will Scarlet, Robin's best friend, and Will Scarlet is the standout of the four. Robin is really good, but Will Scarlet takes the game. Will Scarlet has this amazing murderer hood on, and he's got a sword with all the other accessories that Robin already comes with. So while Will doesn't have a bicocket hat, which he doesn't really need, although it would have been cool for him to have a red one, Will comes with a sword. That to me trumps everything else because Robin Hood figures throughout the history of the merchandising of Robin Hood never end up having a sword, which is really frustrating even though Robin Hood himself always ends up using a sword in all the versions of the mythology that have been put into media. So the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves figures didn't come with swords, the Mego ones didn't come with swords, and yet here's Will Scarlet standing right next to him with a sword belt and a long arming sword. And I'm like, can we not give one of those to Robin? Maybe? Because he's always got one. Except when he's a toy. Okay, I guess not. So yeah, Will Scarlet comes with the quiver, the longbow, the dagger, the longsword, the sword belt, his boots, and his murder hood. Will Scarlet is the most awesome figure of all four of them. And again, they all look great in a group together, but when you really pay attention to Will Scarlet, it's like, man, they really put everything into this one. And that's not Classic TV Toys doing that. Clearly, Mego did that back in the day, and Classic TV Toys is just mirroring what Mego did. And it makes me wonder, why'd Will Scarlet get all the love in this line?
Just brain over brawn, friend.
Despite not being a huge fan of the Mego figure construction and execution, I am really glad to have these four figures now because I do like Mego, I find them very charming, and I love Robin Hood. So having them represented in some form in my collection, in this case via Classic TV Toys, is completely fine with me. These really fit the bill perfectly. I have no complaints on that score. Now, as far as dynamically posing them and making them interesting on display, that's not really possible. And again, I've always felt that that was the case by and large with Megos originally as well. But again, I could be completely wrong, and these Classic TV Toys have some sort of notorious variants in the way that they pulled the elastic together or did their joints. Mego experts, let me know. Now you might be saying, were there no more figures in this range? From what I could tell, it's just Robin Hood and his merry men, the four characters. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense because Robin Hood and his guys, if you crossed them or you stole from the poor, they would kill you. Robin Hood is like the most effective superhero in pop culture history because his enemies didn't last long. Like, if you did awful things to innocent people, he and his boys were gonna roll up and murder you. And they were very good at it. Like, they make Dick Tracy and the Shadow look like lightweights by comparison. I do love the idea of these guys now being in my display case with characters like Skeletor and Lex Luthor just kind of side-eyeing them, because now going forward, they're not gonna be able to get away with as many shenanigans, if any, because Skeletor and Lex Luthor and characters like that, they don't live long in Robin Hood's world. They don't live long in the Robin Hood universe. Robin Hood and his guys are like, And I love the fact that they're called merry men. It's so dark and twisted when you think about it. They're like, oh, they're merry men. But that's what everybody calls them in order to just kind of be able to sleep at night. Because they know that out there in the forest somewhere, in the woods, is this group of just like psychopaths that are zealous about, getting back what's been taken from the common working man. I do kind of love it.
Did I upset your plans?
Oh, Robin Hood is just... He's the best. Robin Hood is the best. And this version of Robin Hood and his guys that harkens slightly back to Errol Flynn's movie. It's doing that classic Robin Hood setup. So it's very much the ballads and the original literature. But at the same time, the Errol Flynn Robin Hood movie really tried to reflect that as well. And of course, it didn't have any action figures in 1938. So they serve both purposes. They're both a classic Robin Hood character depiction from the ballads and literature, but they also can be Errol Flynn and his boys like Alan Hale and all of them from the original 1938 film. And so the fact that they can pull double duty like that, for me personally, as a huge Robin Hood enthusiast, is really fun. I'm very charmed by these figures. And I do wish that when you pose them, their elastic didn't snap them back into place where you really couldn't have them do much, especially with the legs. The legs are a real limitation, but I do love them. I'm happy that these will be standing around in my display cases because they will kill you.